One of the great new features of the Swing Toolkit is the ability to create custom patterns. So, for example, say you're looking at this particular chart on the US CAD, and this is a 30-minute chart, and say you're looking at, you see these swings here, you see this little movement here, this movement here, and say, well, maybe there could have been a pattern that showed that level of support there, that could have given you a heads up that there was a pattern there. So what you can do, and obviously based on the built-in patterns, there was not anything found because we have our automatic pattern finder going on there that's enabled that didn't show anything, so it doesn't match any of our existing patterns. So in order to create a new pattern, first I'm going to use the drawing tool to highlight those swings. So I want to be able to have it do the analysis for me and output these retracements, even though there's not a valid pattern. That's why it's all gray here. We see that it does output these retracement levels, so when we're creating our new pattern, we can use those to go off of. So after I output that, I'm going to right click, go to its properties, or simply just double click the line. I'm going to move this out of the way so we can actually see our pattern here. But you can see here in the parameters here, there's the pattern definitions, and it comes default with 8 patterns. So I'm going to click on that to bring up our dialog box here to create a new pattern. Now here are the ones that it comes predefined, and you can see all the values there. That is all very common. Now if your existing pattern or the new pattern that you're looking to create is similar to an old pattern, it would be useful to just click on that particular pattern before you click add, because when you click add, it will simply duplicate the one that was highlighted, and you'll basically use that as a starting point. So in this case, this is very different than other patterns. So I'm going to just create a new one here. I'm going to give it a name. I'll call it my pattern. You can call it whatever you want. The Market Analyzer ID. Now this is the ID that you're going to use in Market Analyzer to make these columns work properly. So this ID needs to be unique. So based on all of the other IDs out here, I would just go ahead and use the next highest one, which is 9. Because see, this is 8 here, 7, 6, 5. So should set that to 9. Now the XAB retracement. So we look at our pattern here. The X to the A to the B retracement was a 28.15%. Now this may not be the best example because these aren't necessarily hitting Fibonacci numbers, but I'm just kind of going through the process to show you what you would do to define this particular pattern. So in this case, 28.15. So we don't want to be super exact with this. We want to, for example, so say you want a 28% retracement, and then we want there to be a tolerance of 3%. So the equivalent, so that is what that's saying is a 3% tolerance means that this is the equivalent of 25%, which is 28 minus 3, and this would be the equivalent of 31, which is 28 plus 3. So I could also just simply do 25, 31 with a 0 tolerance, and that would be exactly the same thing. But I'll just go ahead and do this here and put that back there. Similar here, XAB retracement. XAB, you see the 177.6% there. We want to allow this to be, you could even say, 175 to 200. You can give it a range, and as long as this falls in that range, then that's considered valid. Next is the ABC tolerance. Same thing. If this is set to 0, then it will use these exact numbers. Now, be careful though. You don't want to use a single number here and then have a tolerance of 0, because even if it hits it pretty much exact, it is extremely rare. It is going to be to the tick perfect. And even this case, I mean, 28.15. That if this was set to 0, this would not match, because 28.15 is not the same as 28%. So you want to give it a little bit of tolerance there. So going forward, BCD, BCD down to here, you see it's 148.6%. Again, you can give this a range. For example, we could say 225 to 275. So we see that this will fall within that range. XAD typically, and that's from X, well, or XCD. In this particular example, the ABC portion of this pattern, the C is beyond the A, which is why it would actually be this retracement down here would be from X to C to D. And that's why it says or right here. If this C was within the range of ABC, then A would be the higher point, and then in that example, then it would be an XAD retracement. So in this case, we see that is basically down to a double bottom here at 102%. So what we can do is just simply say, all right, we want it to be at the 100% line, and we need that this XCD retracement falls within the range of this BCD, which we gave the BCD a range. So you have to kind of imagine a range that would create, and we want the XAD retracement to fall within that range. So 100 is actually okay here, as long as that falls within this range here. So XAC, which is from X to A, projected upwards to C, we can just leave that 0 if we don't want that type of measurement or restriction. That's common with the like the cipher type pattern. Our targets are measured by going from point C down to the lowest that price moves here within our pattern range here, and then retraced up. So our first one, if you can just kind of imagine C to D, retracing upwards to 382 would be the first target, 618 would be a little bit higher, and then if you wanted to create a third target, you could. Our stop is measured by X to C down to D, but so we want our stop to be somewhere lower than this level here, right? I typically just look at what is the next major Fibonacci level beyond whatever this level is. In this case, I'd say 382, 138.2. Okay, so I hit OK there. Hit OK on this here. Now I just need to refresh my chart, and bam, there is my pattern that it created here that we just defined. We have the XAB falls within what we just defined. ABC falls into what we defined. This 100% line falls within our BC. I'll make it output that. Show the output the BC bracket range. So I wanted to show. Remember, we defined it as 100 and was it 25 to 175% or something. So that's what this little range is, kind of highlighting that what we defined as the BC there, and the XCD falls within that range. And so that all of that lines up, and all that is valid, and so it outputs this pattern. Now if I were to change this so it no longer fits within that, it now broke the pattern because it's no longer valid. Now that we've created our pattern, now we can go back into our properties here. We see that the auto swing analyzer here also it stays in sync with this one parameter will stay in sync across the drawing tool and across the auto pattern finder. That way you don't have to create duplicate that work in here. So that will keep that in sync. So we can see that the 9th pattern here is created and it exists there. And so now we want to update our market analyzer so it will show us that pattern or for the label to output properly. Now, one warning here: the fact that this particular pattern, this particular example, is it's old. It's done. It triggered. We hit our first couple targets and well beyond it. So this particular pattern is done. It's gone. So it actually won't show up in our auto pattern finder. This particular example, just because it's already completed. But we need to go through the steps and actually add it. So go to columns, go to, again, back to our pattern here, scroll all the way down, go to the 20 conditions here, and we need to add our new value. Remember, we added a 9th ID here. So for example, in this one, I'm going to select that, click add, and say this is my pattern bullish. Update the value to 9. Now I want to create a negative version of it, so I'm going to click on one of the negative ones, so I can click on add and say my pattern bearish, and then we want that to be -9. So that's the two versions that we of our new pattern that we just created there. And then repeat that process for each of the pattern columns, because we want to make sure that it knows those new conditions in order to output have it output either green or red, and have it output the text that we're expecting. Otherwise, it would just output the number 9 here. So if you see just a random number that outputs in one of these pattern columns, it's because those conditions weren't set up for that particular number. Now, as I mentioned, even though we just set up that particular example, this particular example is already completed, so it won't actually output here, but it would otherwise. I hope that helps explain the process to go through to create your own custom pattern. Please email me with questions at daniel@uppdown.com. That's uppdnn.com, and best success in your trading.